The lunch rush had finally died down, leaving Jhuli Santos standing in the middle of her restaurant, surveying tables that needed clearing and a kitchen that required attention. The afternoon sunlight filtered through the large front windows, casting warm patterns across the wooden floors. She had refinished herself 3 years ago when she first opened the place. Her restaurant, Casa da Jhuli, had become a neighborhood favorite. Known for its home-style cooking and welcoming atmosphere that made everyone feel like family, she wiped her hands on her apron, tucking a strand of dark hair behind her ear as she headed toward the kitchen. The sounds of her staff cleaning and preparing for the dinner service created a familiar rhythm that usually brought her peace. Today, however, something felt different, though she could not quite place what it was. I need to establish Jhuli's character and her current life before introducing the conflict. She's a hard-working single mother who has built a successful business. I need to show her strength and independence before Ricardo appears. Let me continue building the scene and introduce the twins naturally in the back office. Her mother, Helena, sat with Theo and Lucas, the 4-year-old twins who were the center of Jhuli's universe. They were working on coloring books, though Theo struggled more with staying inside the lines, his frustration evident in the way he gripped his crayon too tightly. Lucas, ever patient with his brother, showed him gently how to adjust his grip. "Mama," Lucas called out when he saw her, "can we have the cookies you made?" Jhuli smiled, kneeling down to their level. "After you finish your coloring, my loves, Grandma Helena will give them to you." Theo looked up at her with those striking blue eyes that always seemed too familiar, too piercing for such a young face. "I am trying really hard," he said softly, his speech slightly less clear than his brother's. "I know you are, sweetheart," Jhuli replied, kissing his forehead. "You are doing wonderfully." Helena caught her daughter's eye, concern flickering across her face. They had an appointment with Dr. Campos next week to discuss Theo's developmental delays. The specialist had mentioned possible learning disabilities that would require therapy and intervention. Jhuli pushed the worry down, focusing instead on the present moment with her sons. The bell above the restaurant's front door chimed, signaling a late customer. Jhuli stood, smoothing her apron. "I'll be right back, boys." She walked back into the main dining area, her professional smile already in place. "Good afternoon. Welcome to Casa da Jhuli. Please, sit anywhere you like." The woman who entered was elegant, probably in her mid-30s, with kind eyes and an easy smile. "Thank you. I have heard wonderful things about this place. My brother is visiting from overseas, and I wanted to bring him somewhere special." "We are honored," Jhuli replied warmly. "I will give you a few minutes to look at the menu." As she turned to grab menus from the hostess stand, she heard the door chime again. A man's voice, one that made her freeze mid-step, drifted across the room. "Patricia, you really did not have to go through all this trouble." Jhuli's hand tightened on the menus. She knew that voice. 5 years had passed, but some sounds carved themselves so deeply into memory that time could not erase them. Slowly, she turned around. Ricardo Mendes stood in the doorway, looking almost exactly as she remembered, perhaps a bit more polished, a bit more world-weary. His dark hair was cut shorter now, silver threading through at the temples. He wore an expensive suit that spoke of success and distance from the life they had once shared. His eyes had not yet found her, focused instead on his sister Patricia. "It is no trouble at all," Patricia was saying. "I have been wanting to try this place for months. Everyone says the food is incredible, and the owner has such an inspiring story." Jhuli felt her heart hammering against her ribs. She could turn around, could send one of her staff to serve them, could avoid this confrontation entirely, but her feet would not move, and in the next breath, Ricardo's gaze swept across the restaurant and landed on her. The recognition was instant and devastating. His face went pale, his mouth opening slightly as if to speak, but no words came. They stood frozen, separated by 15 feet and 5 years of silence, while Patricia looked between them with growing confusion. "Jhuli?" Ricardo finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper. "Ricardo." Her own voice sounded strange to her ears, too calm, too controlled. Patricia's eyes widened. "Wait, you two know each other?" Before Jhuli could respond, Lucas appeared at her side, tugging on her apron. Mama Theo spilled water on his coloring book and now he is crying. Ricardo's gaze dropped to the little boy. And Jhuli watched the exact moment when recognition flickered across his features. Lucas had his mother's dark hair and warm skin tone, but those eyes, those unmistakable blue eyes, were not hers. "I need to go," Jhuli said quickly, reaching for Lucas's hand. But Helena had already emerged from the office with Theo, who was indeed crying, his wet coloring book clutched in his small hands. Ricardo stared at the twins, his face cycling through shock, confusion, and something that looked dangerously close to understanding. Theo and Lucas stood side by side, mirror images of each other and in their features. Anyone who looked closely could see traces of the man standing frozen by the door. "How old are they?" Ricardo asked, his voice rough. "That is none of your concern," Jhuli replied, pulling both boys closer to her. Patricia looked completely lost. "Ricardo, what is going on?" But Ricardo was not listening to his sister. He took a step forward, then another, his eyes never leaving the twins. "Jhuli, please. How old are they?" Helena, sensing the tension, gently took the boys' hands. "Come on, my darlings. Let us go get those cookies in the kitchen, away from all this noise." "But Mama said after we finish coloring," Theo protested through his tears. "Today is a special exception," Helena said firmly, guiding them away. She gave Jhuli a meaningful look that said they would talk later. Once the boys were gone, the silence in the restaurant became unbearable. The few remaining afternoon customers had stopped eating, sensing the drama unfolding. Jhuli felt exposed, vulnerable in a way she had not felt in years. "They are 4, she said finally, her voice low. "They turned for last month." She watched Ricardo do the math, watched the realization settle over him like a heavy cloak. His hand came up to his face, rubbing his jaw in a gesture she remembered from years ago when he was processing something difficult. "Why did you not tell me?" The question came out broken, almost pleading. Jhuli's composure cracked. "Tell you?" "I tried, Ricardo. I called, I emailed, I even went to your apartment. But you were already gone, already on that plane to Singapore without a word to anyone. Your phone was disconnected, your email bounced back, and you left no forwarding address." "I had no idea," he said. "The company transferred me so quickly. I thought we had ended things. I thought there was nothing left to say." "Well, there was something," Jhuli said bitterly. "There were 2 somethings, actually. But I figured it out on my own, just like I have figured out everything else for the past 5 years." Patricia, who had been silent throughout this exchange, spoke up hesitantly. "Are you saying those boys are Ricardo's sons?" Jhuli met her eyes directly. "Yes." Ricardo swayed slightly, reaching out to steady himself against a nearby chair. "I have sons," he whispered, as if testing the words. "I have been gone for 5 years, and I have sons." "You have been gone," Jhuli confirmed. "And we have been here building a life without you. So whatever you are thinking, whatever you are planning to say next, understand that we do not need you. We have managed just fine." But even as she said the words, she knew they were not entirely true. She thought of Theo's struggles, of the therapy he would need, of the nights she lay awake wondering if having a father would make things easier for her boys. She thought of all the times Lucas asked why other kids had dads and they did not, and how she had to explain that some families looked different. Ricardo straightened, his business executive composure returning. "I need to see them again. I need to talk to you properly." "Please, Jhuli, now you want to talk?" She shook her head. "You had 5 years to find me if you wanted to. I am not hard to locate. This restaurant has been featured in 3 local magazines." "I did not know to look," he said desperately. "If I had known, I would have come back. I would have been here." Jhuli studied his face, looking for deception, for the easy promises that men sometimes made when confronted with unexpected consequences. What she saw instead was genuine shock, and something that might have been regret. "I close at 8, she said finally. "If you want to talk, come back then. But Ricardo, understand this. If you are going to walk into their lives, you cannot walk out again. They are children, not business deals you can negotiate your way out of." "I understand," he said quietly. Patricia touched her brother's arm. "Maybe we should go. Give everyone some time to process." As they turned to leave, Ricardo looked back one more time. "I will be here at 8. I promise." After they left, Jhuli sank into the nearest chair, her legs suddenly unable to support her. 5 years. 5 years of building a life, of learning to be both mother and father, of convincing herself that she and the boys were complete just as they were. And now, in the span of 10 minutes, everything had shifted. From the kitchen, she could hear her mother's soft voice soothing the boys, could hear their laughter as Helena distracted them with cookies and stories. They were happy, healthy, loved. The question that terrified her was whether letting Ricardo into their lives would enhance that happiness or shatter it entirely. Ricardo returned at exactly 8 o'clock. Just as the last customer was leaving, Jhuli had sent her staff home early, wanting privacy for whatever conversation was about to unfold. Helena had taken the boys back to her apartment for the night. Understanding without being told that her daughter needed space to handle this situation, Jhuli unlocked the door to let him in, then locked it again behind him. The restaurant felt different in the evening quiet, more intimate, more exposing. She gestured toward a table near the back, away from the windows where passersby might see them. "Coffee," she offered, falling back on the habits of hospitality. "Please," Ricardo said, settling into the chair carefully, yes, as if afraid sudden movements might shatter the fragile possibility of dialogue. She prepared 2 cups in silence, her hands moving through the familiar motions while her mind raced. When she returned to the table, setting his cup in front of him, she noticed his hands were shaking slightly. "Oh, I do not know where to start," he admitted. "Start with why you left," Jhuli said. "Start with why you did not tell me you were going." Ricardo wrapped his hands around the warm cup. The promotion came suddenly. The company needed someone in Singapore within 2 weeks. It was everything I had been working toward, the kind of opportunity that does not come twice. We had been arguing so much those last few months, about my hours, about my priorities. I thought you wanted out anyway. "So you made the decision for both of us," Jhuli said quietly. "You decided our relationship was over without actually having that conversation." "I was a coward," he acknowledged. "I convinced myself it was better to make a clean break. By the time I landed in Singapore, I had already started building walls around that part of my life. I told myself I was moving forward." Jhuli sipped her coffee, the bitterness matching her mood. "I found out I was pregnant 3 weeks after you left. I was terrified, but also angry. So angry that you got to just disappear while I had to face everything alone." "Tell me," Ricardo said. "Tell me everything I missed." So she did. She told him about the difficult pregnancy, carrying twins while working 2 jobs to save money. She told him about the 30-hour labor, about holding Theo and Lucas for the first time and feeling both overwhelming love and crushing fear. She told him about her mother moving in to help, about the sleepless nights, the constant worry about money, about doing everything right. "And when they were 6 months old, I used my savings to open this restaurant," she continued. "It was risky, probably foolish, but I needed something that was mine, something I could build for them. I needed to prove I could give them a good life." Ricardo listened without interrupting, his expression growing more pained with each revelation. When she finished, he sat in silence for a long moment. "I want to be their father," he said finally. "Not just financially. I want to be present. I want to know them." "It is not that simple," Jhuli replied. "You cannot just decide to be a father and expect everything to fall into place. They do not know you. To them, you are a stranger. And let me stop being a stranger," he said. "Please, Jhuli, I know I have no right to ask, but I am asking anyway." She studied his face, looking for the young man she had once loved beneath the polished exterior. "There is something you need to know about Theo," she said carefully. "He has some developmental delays. We are seeing a specialist next week. They think he might have a learning disability, possibly dyslexia or something similar. His speech is behind Lucas's. His motor skills are not quite where they should be. He gets frustrated easily because he knows he is different from his brother." Ricardo absorbed this information seriously. "What does he need?" "Therapy, special education support, patience," Jhuli said. "A lot of patience. Lucas is easy. He is bright and social and adaptable. Theo requires more attention, more understanding. If you are going to be in their lives, you need to be in both their lives equally, even though one will demand more from you. I understand, Ricardo said. What else do I need to know? They talked for another hour, Jhuli filling in the details of the boys' personalities, their routines, their fears, and joys. Ricardo asked questions, took mental notes, and gradually the tension between them began to ease into something almost resembling cooperation. I want a DNA test, Ricardo said as they were preparing to leave. Not because I doubt you, but because I need it to be official, for legal purposes, for their protection and mine. Jhuli nodded. That is fair. I will arrange it through Dr. Campos, our family doctor. The test was conducted 3 days later in Dr. Campos's quiet office. The doctor, a kind woman in her 50s who had known Jhuli since the twins were born, handled everything with professional discretion. Theo cried when they swabbed his cheek, not understanding why. And Ricardo instinctively reached out to comfort him, then pulled back, unsure if he had the right. It is okay, Jhuli said softly. You can comfort him. Ricardo knelt down, meeting Theo at eye level. It is all over now, little one. You were very brave. Theo studied him with those blue eyes that were so like his own. You talk funny, he said. Ricardo smiled despite the tension. I have been living in another country. I suppose I picked up an accent. What is an accent? Lucas asked, always curious. It is when you say words a little differently than other people, Ricardo explained. Like how Grandma Helena sometimes uses different words because she grew up in a different place. The boys seemed satisfied with this answer. Returning to the toys in the waiting room, Dr. Campos caught Jhuli's eye and smiled slightly. A gesture that said she approved of how Ricardo was handling himself. The results came back 4 days later, though everyone already knew what they would say. Probability of paternity, 99.9%. Ricardo stared at the paper for a long time before carefully folding it and placing it in his wallet. What happens now? Jhuli asked. They were sitting in a cafe, neutral territory, trying to figure out how to move forward. I want to set up a trust for them, Ricardo said. And I want regular visitation, if you will allow it. I know I need to earn their trust, and yours, but I want to try. Your job, Jhuli said. You are still based in Singapore? Ricardo's jaw tightened. Actually, the company wants me to go back. There is a major project starting, a promotion to regional director. My business partner Renato has been calling constantly. They want me on a plane by the end of the month. Jhuli felt something cold settle in her stomach. Of course they do. I have not given them an answer yet, Ricardo said quickly. I have been stalling. Why? He met her eyes directly. Because I do not know if I can leave now. Knowing they exist, knowing they are here, how do I get on a plane and go back to that life? But it is your career, Jhuli said. It is everything you've worked for. Is it worth more than knowing my sons? Ricardo asked, and she could hear the genuine conflict in his voice. I have spent 5 years building success, and for what? To sit in an empty apartment halfway around the world while my children grow up without me? Jhuli did not answer, could not answer. This was his choice to make, and she refused to be the reason he either stayed or left. Over the next 2 weeks, Ricardo began spending time with the boys. Short visits at first, an hour here and there, always with Jhuli present. He brought books and read to them, his voice stumbling over the children's stories but persisting anyway. He learned that Lucas loved anything with animals, and Theo preferred stories about space and stars. He attended Theo's appointment with the educational specialist, sitting quietly while the doctor explained the testing results. Moderate dyslexia, some sensory processing issues, nothing that could not be managed with proper support and intervention. The therapy would be expensive, the specialist warned, and would require consistent effort. Cost is not an issue, Ricardo said immediately. Whatever he needs. The specialist nodded approvingly. What he needs most is patience and people who believe in him. Children with learning differences often struggle with self-esteem. Having supportive parents makes all the difference. After the appointment, Ricardo asked if he could take Theo for ice cream, just the two of them. Jhuli hesitated, then agreed, watching them walk down the street together. Theo's small hand tucked trustingly into Ricardo's larger one. When they returned an hour later, Theo was chattering excitedly about the spaceship flavor he had tried. "Papa Ricardo says I can be an astronaut even if reading is hard," he announced proudly. Jhuli's breath caught at the title, Papa Ricardo. She looked at Ricardo, who shrugged slightly, his eyes suspiciously bright. That night after the boys were asleep, Ricardo called her. "Renato contacted me again today," he said without preamble. "The company is giving me an ultimatum. Return by next week, or they will give the position to someone else." "What are you going to tell them?" Jhuli asked, though her heart was already racing. "I am going to tell them I am staying," Ricardo said quietly. "I am going to tell them I have something more important here." "Ricardo, you do not have to sacrifice your career for this," Jhuli said, even as hope bloomed painfully in her chest. "We managed before."
"This is not about obligation," he replied. "This is about choosing what matters. And Jhuli, they matter. You all matter. More than any promotion or title or amount of money. I missed 5 years. I refuse to miss any more." Jhuli closed her eyes, tears sliding down her cheeks. "Are you certain?" "I have never been more certain of anything," Ricardo said. "I am coming home. Really coming home." The professional consequences came swiftly and harshly. Ricardo's company did not take his decision well. The position went to someone else, and the relationships he had built over 5 years cooled noticeably. Renato called him a fool, said he was throwing away everything they had worked for over a woman and children he barely knew. "They are my children," Ricardo had replied calmly, "and that makes all the difference." He resigned formally, negotiated a severance package, and began the work of rebuilding his life in the city he had left behind. The first major decision was finding work that would allow him to be present for the boys. He took a position with a smaller firm, less prestigious, but with reasonable hours and no international travel. The pay cut was substantial, but he had savings, and more importantly, he had time. Time became the currency that mattered most. Time to learn that Theo needed extra help with his homework, that certain textures in food bothered him, that he shut down when he felt overwhelmed. Time to discover that Lucas, for all his easy charm, sometimes felt invisible next to his brother who required more attention. Time to understand that parenting was not about grand gestures, but about showing up consistently, day after day. Helena watched Ricardo's transformation with cautious approval. She had been the one holding Jhuli together all these years, the one who woke up the boys when they were sick, who helped with school pickups and bedtime routines. She did not trust easily, especially not men who had disappeared once before. "You hurt my daughter," she told Ricardo bluntly one afternoon when he came to pick up the boys. "You left her alone when she needed you most." "I know," Ricardo said, meeting her eyes without flinching. "I cannot change the past, but I can make sure I am here for the future." "Words," Helena said dismissively. "Men are good at words." "Then watch my actions," Ricardo replied quietly. "I am not asking for forgiveness I have not earned. I am asking for the chance to earn it." Helena studied him for a long moment, then nodded curtly. It was not approval, not yet, but it was acknowledgement. The boys adapted to their new reality with the flexibility of children. Theo, in particular, formed a strong bond with Ricardo. Perhaps it was because Ricardo never seemed frustrated by his struggles, never compared him to Lucas, never made him feel less than. When Theo had meltdowns over his reading assignments, Ricardo sat with him patiently, breaking words into smaller pieces, celebrating tiny victories. "You got 3 words right today," Ricardo would say. "Yesterday it was 2. You're getting stronger." Lucas required a different approach. He was socially observant, aware that his father's presence changed the family dynamic. One evening, he asked Jhuli directly, "Is Papa Ricardo going to live with us?" Jhuli and Ricardo had been carefully navigating this question themselves. They were not a couple, not in any romantic sense. Too much time had passed. Too much hurt lay between them. But they were partners in parenting, and that meant making decisions together. "How would you feel about that?" Jhuli asked her son carefully. Lucas considered this seriously. "I think it would be good for Theo. He gets sad sometimes when Papa Ricardo leaves." The wisdom in that statement, the way Lucas prioritized his brother's needs over his own preferences, made Jhuli's heart ache. "What about you, my love? What do you want?" "I want us all to be together," Lucas said simply, "like other families." That conversation led to another one between Jhuli and Ricardo. Late at night, after the boys were asleep, they sat in Jhuli's small living room, the space that had been hers alone for so long, now feeling different with his presence in it. "I am not asking to get back together," Ricardo said carefully. "I know too much has happened for that, but I want to be here, really here, not just weekend visits and scheduled time. I want to be part of the daily routine, the boring parts and the hard parts." "Where would you live?" Jhuli asked practically. "I have been looking at apartments nearby," he said, "close enough to be available, far enough to give you space." Jhuli shook her head slowly. "That seems wasteful. 2 rents, 2 sets of everything the boys need." She paused, gathering courage. "The building has a 2-bedroom apartment opening up next month, 1 floor down. You could take that. The boys could go between both places easily. It was a compromise, a way to be close without forcing a relationship neither of them was ready for." Ricardo agreed immediately, grateful for any arrangement that kept him near his sons. The practical living situation evolved naturally over the following months. Ricardo would come up for breakfast, help get the boys ready for school, then head to work. Evenings often found all 4 of them together, doing homework, making dinner, navigating the ordinary chaos of family life. Weekends involved trips to the park, visits to museums, lazy mornings where the boys would burst into Ricardo's apartment demanding pancakes. Theo's therapy sessions became a family affair. The therapist, a patient woman named Sandra, worked with him twice a week on reading strategies and emotional regulation. Ricardo attended every session, taking notes, asking questions, implementing strategies at home. Slowly, measurably, Theo began to improve. The victories were small but significant. A book read with only minimal help. A spelling test passed. A moment of frustration handled without a complete meltdown. "Papa Ricardo," Theo said one evening, his head bent over a puzzle they were working on together. "Am I stupid?" Ricardo's hand stilled. "Why would you ask that?" "Because Lucas can read big books and I still need help with small words," Theo said, his voice small. Ricardo set down the puzzle piece and turned to face his son fully. "Listen to me very carefully. You are not stupid. Your brain works differently than Lucas's brain, that is all. Some brains are better at reading. Some are better at other things. Do you know what you are brilliant at?" Theo shook his head. "You notice things other people miss," Ricardo said. "You remember every single fact about planets and stars. You are kind of people who are sad. You never give up, even when things are hard. Those are superpowers, Theo. Reading is just a skill, and skills can be learned." Theo considered this, then leaned against his father's side. Ricardo wrapped an arm around him, feeling the trust in that small gesture like a weight and a gift. Lucas, watching from across the room, smiled and returned to his own book. As the first year drew to a close, something unexpected began to happen. Jhuli and Ricardo, thrown together constantly by the demand of parenting, started to rediscover each other, not as the people they had been 5 years ago, young and naive and driven by passion, but as the people they had become. Jhuli saw a man who had been humbled by his choices, who put his children before his ego, who showed up even when things were difficult. Ricardo saw a woman who had taken every obstacle and transformed it into strength, who had built a life and a business from nothing, who loved fiercely and without reservation. The shift was gradual, noticed first in small things. The way Ricardo's hand would linger when he passed Jhuli a cup of coffee. The way Jhuli found herself watching him read to the boys, something warm and complicated settling in her chest. The way conversations that started about schedules and logistics would drift into deeper territory, into hopes and regrets and possibilities. Helena noticed. "Be careful," she warned her daughter. "He broke your heart once. He is not the same person," Jhuli said. "Neither am I." "People do not change that much," Helena countered. But as the months continued, even Helena had to admit that Ricardo's commitment never wavered. He was there for every school event, every doctor's appointment, every milestone. When Theo had a seizure at school, a complication from stress that terrified everyone, Ricardo left work immediately and met them at the hospital, his face pale but his presence steady. When Lucas won a school award for creative writing, Ricardo was in the audience, cheering louder than anyone. When Jhuli's restaurant was reviewed by a major food critic and received praise that brought in new customers, Ricardo organized a celebration, complete with flowers and a card the boys had helped him make. On the anniversary of the day they had reconnected at the restaurant, Ricardo asked if he could take Jhuli to dinner, just the two of them. Helena agreed to watch the boys, giving her daughter a meaningful look that said everything and nothing. They went to a quiet restaurant across town, somewhere with no memories attached. Over wine and food neither of them tasted much. They talked honestly about everything that had happened. "I do not know if I can ever fully forgive you for leaving," Jhuli said. "Part of me will always remember what it felt like to be alone and pregnant and terrified." "I understand," Ricardo said. "I do not know if I can forgive myself for that either. But," Jhuli continued, "I can see who you are now. I can see how hard you are trying. And I think maybe we could try to build something new. Not what we had before, but something better, something stronger." Ricardo reached across the table, taking her hand carefully. "I would like that, more than anything." "The boys come first," Jhuli said firmly. "Always, always," Ricardo agreed. "They are the reason for everything." The relationship that developed between them was different from their first romance. It was slower, more careful, built on trust that had to be earned rather than assumed. They went on dates, but always came home to the boys. They had disagreements, but worked through them with communication instead of avoidance. They built a partnership based on respect and shared purpose. 6 months later, Ricardo proposed, not with grand gestures or public displays, but quietly, in Jhuli's living room after the boys had gone to bed. "I want us to be a real family," he said. "Not separate floors, not separate lives. I want to wake up with you and fall asleep with you and face every challenge together." Jhuli looked at the simple ring he offered, then at his face, searching for any doubt. What she found was certainty, hard-won and genuine. "Yes," she said, "but we do this right. We go slow. We make sure the boys are comfortable with every change." They were married 8 months later in a small ceremony at Casa de Jhuli, the restaurant where their paths had collided again. Theo and Lucas served as ring bearers, proud in their matching suits. Helena cried, finally allowed herself to believe that this man who had caused so much pain might actually bring lasting joy. The boys adapted to having Ricardo move in fully with surprising ease. Theo, in particular, seemed more settled, his anxiety lessening with the security of both parents under one roof. Lucas thrived on the family dinners, the bedtime routines, the ordinary rhythms of a complete family unit. There were still challenges. Theo's learning disability required ongoing support. Lucas struggled sometimes with feeling overshadowed. Money was occasionally tight, despite Ricardo's income, because therapy and special education were expensive. But they faced each obstacle together as a unit, and that made all the difference. On a Saturday morning 2 years after Ricardo's return, Jhuli stood in the kitchen of their home, watching through the window as Ricardo and the boys played in the small backyard. Theo was explaining something about constellations, his hands moving animatedly. Lucas was attempting a cartwheel. Ricardo was laughing, genuinely happy in a way she had never seen during their first relationship. Helena came up beside her, following her gaze. "He really did come back," she said softly. "He really did," Jhuli agreed. "Are you happy?" her mother asked. Jhuli thought about the question seriously. Their life was not perfect. They had struggles and disagreements and moments of frustration. But it was real, built on honesty and effort and love that had been tested and proven. "Yes," she said finally, "I am happy." Outside, Theo called for his mother to come see something. Lucas echoed the call, both boys waving enthusiastically. Ricardo turned and smiled, gesturing for her to join them. Jhuli walked outside into the sunlight, into the imperfect, beautiful, hard-won life they had built together. She had learned that families did not have to start perfectly to end up whole. Sometimes they broke apart and came back together stronger. Sometimes the best stories were the ones that began with mistakes and ended with grace. As she reached her family, the boys grabbing her hands and Ricardo's arm coming around her shoulders, Jhuli understood that this was what love looked like after it had been tested by time and distance and pain. It looked like showing up. It looked like choosing to stay. It looked like building something new from the broken pieces of what came before. And it looked, she thought as Theo began his enthusiastic explanation of the Big Dipper, exactly like home.